this video, I'll help work through the different forms of joints in the body. Joints are also known as articulations, and they provide for a wide variety of different types of movements. Some of them are more stable, some of them are more movable, and you can kind of think of an X shape on a graph. You can't have it both ways. You can have a really stable joint where you go up the slope of one of the X's. What is that going to mean? That's going to mean you're going to become less flexible. Or you can be super flexible, but that makes you slightly less stable. And so kind of thinking about that, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have ultimate flexibility and ultimate flexibility. Ultimate stability and structure and ultimate range of motion. You have to give one or the other. So we can look here. Structurally, we divide the joints into 4 different classes based on what material we find between the bones. So anytime we talk about a joint or articulation, we mean where one bone meets another. And when there's bone between one bone and the other, it's called a bony joint. An example of that would be right in your forehead. If you actually just feel in the middle of your forehead, it just feels like you have one big frontal bone. But it turns out that before you were born, you had 2 that slowly grew together. There's only bone between the bony tissue, and so it's a totally solid, immovable form. And because it's bone, binding one bone to another, it is a bony joint. Fibrous joints have cartilage binding one to the other. These are also very stable, very strong. Fibrous joints include the sutures between the skeletal bones and the tooth and gum joints that hold our teeth in place. Well, if bone between the bones gives us a bony joint and fiber between the bones gives us a fibrous joint, then you would be right to guess that it's the cartilage that joins one bone to another in the cartilaginous joints. Synovial joints. It is a synovial membrane and a space between the bones filled with synovial fluid that gives this classification. It's named, and these are the common joints that you think about: knuckles, wrists, elbows, shoulders and hips and knees and toes, things like that. We can also classify the bones based on their function: non-movable, synarthrosis; slightly movable, amphiarthrosis; and a freely movable joint is called a diarthrosis. As you can see, this chapter is mostly about classification. So I strongly encourage you to make flashcards and shuffle them and lay them out and shuffle them again as a way of not just learning about these terms, but in understanding in which category they fit. A bony joint is known as a synostosis. 2 bones gradually fuse into one, and it's immovable. Like I said, the fetal mandible, right, sort of where you would see that chin cleft, right in the mental fossa there, used to be 2 mandibles sort of shaped like hockey sticks, and now they fuse together. Frontal bones as well. The mature closed growth plate, the epiphyseal line that we had talked about in the last chapter, that's another example of a synostosis. And if you live long enough, your sutures fuse together, so you just have one big round cranial bone. The fibrous joints are united by fibrous connective tissue, mostly collagen. There's no joint cavity. There's little movement. In some cases, not really any movement. And examples of these fibrous joints include sutures, the syndesmoses, and gomphoses. We can see the sutures here. Remember, in an adult who isn't yet 80 or 85, anybody younger than that, your sutures are fibrous joints. And if we could see At a more microscopic level, we'd see tiny little fibers running in between, sort of sewing one bone to the other. So the jigsaw pattern provides for flexibility, and then for stability, and then those collagen fibers really stitch everything together. In between the tibia and fibula and the radius and ulna, as we see here, is a fibrous joint that is movable. It's called a syndesmosis, or plural, syndesmoses. Remember, in the forearm, we need to be able to move the radius over the top of the ulna back and forth. This is referred to as pronation and supination. At the same time, if I fall on my outstretched hand, the last thing I would want is for my radius and ulna to split apart. And so this is what nature has done. It has created a way to keep these two bones pretty well parallel while allowing one to spin over the top or cross over the top of the other. This so-called interosseous membrane is an example of a syndesmosis. We also have syndesmosis, by the way, between the tibia and fibula. But for obvious reasons, the fibers are tighter and shorter, so we have a little bit of pronation, supination kind of movement down in the foreleg, but not nearly what we see in the forearm. Another example of a fibrous joint here is a gomphosis, and this one's pretty easy because it makes me think of gums, right? Gomphosis. Look at this. Your teeth are held in their sockets by all of these little fibers, the periodontal ligaments. I have little kids in my house, and our youngest, Liam, just lost a tooth a few months ago, and he was working on it. It was getting wiggly and wiggly, and then the very last time he pulled, dink, he said he could feel this little rope break. Right? The last of the periodontal ligaments. Periodontal disease, by the way, destroys these, and so as adults, if we don't take good care of our teeth, periodontal disease will erode these periodontal ligaments, and then you might lose your teeth. And they don't grow back. Cartilaginous joints, two bones joined by means of cartilage. The two cartilaginous structural classifications are synchondroses and symphyses. And notice that it is the type of cartilage, as well as the location, that differentiates one from the other. A synchondrosis has hyaline cartilage joining one bone to the other, just as we see in the epiphyseal plate, the growth plate. A symphysis, like the pubic symphysis, for example, has fibrocartilage, not hyaline cartilage. Fibrocartilage has much more collagen. It's sturdier and allows for a little bit more flexibility. Other examples of synchondroses, in addition to the growth plates, the epiphyseal plates, where the pelvic bones fuse together here in the acetabulum, and where the pubis and the ischium come together. The costosternal connections as well. Hyaline cartilage, synchondrosis. The pubic symphysis and the intervertebral discs are also examples of cartilaginous joints, in this case fibrocartilage, so they're a bit more movable. In the next video, I'll walk you through the many types of the synovial joints.